You remember the sound. That hot skillet popping with bacon grease and somebody laying a piece of white bread face down in it until the edges turned brown and glassy. That was supper in the hollers. No menu, no recipe card, just whatever was left in the kitchen and two hands that knew how to stretch it. Number 6 on this list puts raw onion on peanut butter, and people ate it like it was the most normal thing in the world. Number 19 on this list needs nothing but a jar of apple butter and a biscuit so hot it burns your fingers through the cloth. The fast food chains buried these sandwiches because you cannot franchise something that costs almost nothing to make. Here are 25 lost hillbilly sandwiches America threw away. Number 25, the banana and mayonnaise sandwich. Take a ripe banana, slice it lengthwise, lay the halves on a piece of soft white bread, spread Duke's mayonnaise on the other slice, and press it together. That was lunch in the hills of eastern Kentucky and all through the Ozarks. The banana gave you sweetness and the mayonnaise gave you fat, and together they made something that sounds wrong until you try it. Grocery stores sold more bananas than any other fruit in America by the 1940s, and in the hollers where meat was scarce, a banana sandwich cost less than a nickel. Kids took them to school wrapped in wax paper. Old men ate them on the porch after supper. It was not fancy. It was not trying to be. It was a meal that asked nothing of you except hunger. Number 24, sugar bread. White bread, a layer of butter, and a heavy pour of white sugar on top, folded in half. Some families used brown sugar. Some sprinkled cinnamon if they had it, but most did not. This was what you ate when the pantry was bare and the next check was still a week out. It showed up at kitchen tables across West Virginia, the Carolinas, and deep into the Tennessee hills from the 1930s through the 1970s. Mothers handed it to children and called it a treat because calling it what it was felt too heavy. The butter melted into the bread and the sugar gave you a rush that lasted about 20 minutes, and then you were hungry again. But for those 20 minutes, you were eating something sweet, and sweetness mattered when everything else was hard. Before I go further, for the folks who want more recipes like these all gathered in one place, I put together the Vintage Recipe Guide. It is a cookbook full of the kind of meals your people actually made. You can find it on my website, vintagelifestyleusa.com. I will not bring it up again. If you want it, it is there. Now, back to the list. Number 23, the fried green tomato sandwich. You sliced a green tomato thick, at least a quarter inch, dredged it in cornmeal with salt and pepper, and fried it in a cast iron skillet until the coating crackled. Then you laid it on white bread, sometimes with a smear of mayonnaise, sometimes plain. The tomato stayed tart and firm inside that cornmeal shell, nothing like a ripe tomato. This was a late summer sandwich in the Appalachian foothills, when the garden was producing faster than anyone could eat and the first frost was still weeks away. You used the green ones because the ripe ones were going into canning jars. Nothing went to waste. The fried green tomato sandwich was what happened when practicality and flavor landed on the same plate. Number 22, the ramp and egg biscuit. Every spring in the Appalachian Mountains, the ramps came up. Wild leeks with a smell so strong your neighbors knew you had been picking them before you walked through the door. You chopped the ramps, bulb and leaves both, and scrambled them into eggs with bacon grease in the pan. Then you split a hot buttermilk biscuit and piled the eggs inside. The flavor was sharper than any onion and earthier than garlic, and it stayed on your breath for 2 days whether you liked it or not. Ramp suppers and ramp festivals ran through West Virginia, western North Carolina, and eastern Tennessee every April. People drove hours to dig them out of the hillsides. Today, ramps show up on restaurant menus at $12 a plate. In the hollers, they were free and they were everywhere. Number 21, the soup bean sandwich. Pinto beans cooked low and slow with a piece of salt pork until they fell apart. You mashed a spoonful of those beans onto a piece of cornbread or white bread, added raw onion if you had it, and ate it with your hands. This was a Monday sandwich in eastern Kentucky and southwest Virginia, where a pot of beans simmered on the stove all weekend and showed up in every form imaginable by midweek. The beans had enough starch to hold together on the bread, and the salt pork gave the whole thing a richness that disguised how cheap it really was. A 10-pound bag of pinto beans fed a family for weeks, The soup bean sandwich was proof that poverty made people creative long before anyone called it resourceful. There was a time when a sandwich was not a product. It was an answer to a question nobody asked out loud, which was, how do you feed people when the money runs out before the month does? The Hillbilly sandwich did not come from a cookbook or a television show. It came from the back of the pantry, from the garden, from the smokehouse, from the woods behind the house. Every one of them solved the same problem. Turn almost nothing into something a person could hold in two hands and eat standing up, sitting on a porch step, or walking to the barn. The grocery chains replaced that knowledge with convenience, and convenience replaced memory. A generation of sandwiches disappeared not because they failed, but because they were too cheap to sell. Number 20, the fatback biscuit. Fatback is the slab of pure fat cut from the back of a hog, no meat in it at all. You sliced it thin, fried it in a dry skillet until it rendered and turned golden, then laid those crispy slices inside a split buttermilk biscuit. The grease that came out of the fatback went right back onto the biscuit. This was a working man's breakfast in the mountains of North Carolina and Virginia from the early 1900s through the 1960s. Loggers and miners ate it because the fat kept you full through a 10-hour shift when nothing else would. Nobody pretended it was health food. It was fuel, pure and simple, and it cost almost nothing because fatback was the cheapest cut the butcher sold. Number 19, the apple butter and hot biscuit. Every fall in the Appalachian Hills, families gathered around a copper kettle set over an open fire and stirred apples for hours. The apples cooked down with cinnamon, cloves, and a little sugar until they turned into a thick, dark spread that tasted like autumn had been concentrated into a jar. The stirring was the hard part. You used a long wooden paddle and you never stopped because if the apple butter scorched on the bottom, the whole batch was ruined. Some families kept the fire going from dawn until after dark. Children took turns with the paddle. Neighbors came over to help and stayed for supper. The apple butter went into mason jars and lined the shelves of the root cellar, and it lasted all winter. When you split a hot biscuit straight from the oven and spread that dark apple butter across the steaming inside, the heat from the biscuit loosened the spices and the whole kitchen smelled like October. It was the simplest sandwich in the world, bread and fruit. But the fruit had been transformed by 12 hours of stirring, and the bread had been made by hand that same morning, and together they carried the weight of an entire season's labor. You could buy apple butter in a jar at the store by the 1970s, but it was not the same. The store version was thinner, sweeter, and missing the smokiness that came from cooking outdoors over hardwood coals. The real thing required a community, a fire, and a full day of work, and that is exactly why it disappeared. Nobody has that kind of time anymore, but the people who remember it will tell you that no sandwich since has tasted half as good. Number 18, the sardine and cracker sandwich. A tin of sardines cost a dime at the general store, and it kept on the shelf for years without refrigeration. You peeled back the tin lid, laid the sardines on saltine crackers, added a drop of hot sauce if you had a bottle around, and that was lunch. Coal miners in West Virginia and Kentucky carried sardine tins in their lunch pails because the fish did not spoil in the heat of the mine. Farmers kept a few tins in the barn for the same reason. The oil in the tin was salty and rich, and some people poured it right over the crackers. It was protein that traveled well and asked nothing of you in return. No cooking, no preparation, no cleanup. Just peel, eat, and throw the tin in the trash. Number 17, the poke salad and egg sandwich. Pokeweed grows wild across the American South, and in the hills it was one of the first green things to come up in spring. But you had to know what you were doing. The raw plant is poisonous. You picked the young leaves before they got too big, boiled them in 3 changes of water to pull the toxins out, drained them, and fried them in bacon grease with scrambled eggs. The cooked greens tasted something like spinach, but earthier, and layered on bread with the eggs they made a sandwich that tasted like the woods themselves. Old-timers in the Ozarks and along the Appalachian ridges knew exactly when to pick poke and exactly how long to boil it. That knowledge passed from mother to daughter for generations. Today, most people walk right past pokeweed without recognizing it, and the sandwich walked away with them. Number 16. Streak-o-lean on white bread. Streak-o-lean was the cheap cut of salt-cured pork belly that ran more fat than meat, just thin streaks of lean running through thick layers of white. You sliced it, fried it slow in its own grease until the edges curled and crisped, and laid it on a piece of white bread. The bread soaked up the drippings and went soft and almost translucent where the grease touched it. This was a supper sandwich in rural Georgia, Alabama, and the Carolina Piedmont, where streak-o-lean cost half what bacon cost and lasted twice as long in the smokehouse. It was saltier than bacon and fattier than side meat, and people who grew up eating it will tell you it tasted better than both of them put together. You could argue that every sandwich on this list was born from the same arithmetic. Take what you have, divide it by the number of mouths at the table, and figure out how to make the answer feel like enough. That is not a recipe. That is survival math, and the women who ran it in their heads every day did not call it that. They called it Tuesday. They called it getting by. The Hillbilly sandwich was never meant to impress anybody. It was meant to solve a problem that showed up 3 times a day, every single day, for decades. The fact that some of them tasted extraordinary was almost accidental. Flavor was a byproduct of necessity, not the goal. The goal was another day where everybody ate. Number 15, the sorghum and butter biscuit. Sorghum molasses was the sweetener of the southern mountains long before white sugar became affordable. Families grew sorghum cane in small plots, cut it in the fall, and pressed the stalks through a horse-drawn mill. The juice ran into an evaporator pan set over a wood fire and cooked down into a thick, amber syrup with a flavor deeper and more complex than honey. You split a hot biscuit, spread butter on one side and a heavy pour of sorghum on the other, and pressed them together. The butter and the sorghum mixed into something rich and golden that ran down your fingers if you were not careful. Every country store in Kentucky and Tennessee sold sorghum in mason jars through the 1960s. Today it is a specialty item that costs $8 a jar. For 100 years, it was the cheapest sweet thing in the hills. Number 14, the fried catfish sandwich. The catfish came out of every creek, pond, and river bottom in the hill country. You caught it on a trot line or a cane pole baited with chicken liver, cleaned it on the bank, and carried it home in a bucket. The breading was cornmeal, salt, black pepper, and nothing else. You heated lard in a cast iron skillet until a pinch of cornmeal sizzled the second it hit the surface, and you laid the fillets in gently because a catfish fillet will fall apart if you handle it rough. The fish fried for about 4 minutes on each side until the cornmeal crust turned dark gold and the meat inside went white and flaky. You set the fillets on a piece of brown paper to drain, then laid them on white bread with a slice of raw onion and a squirt of yellow mustard. The bread went soft against the hot fish, and the cornmeal crust stayed crunchy where it pressed against the onion. Friday nights in the Ozarks and the Tennessee Valley, this was what people ate. Church fish fries served them by the hundreds. Families who lived near water ate catfish sandwiches twice a week because the fish was free and the cornmeal cost next to nothing. The combination of free protein and penny cornmeal made the fried catfish sandwich one of the most economical meals in the rural South. Commercial catfish farming changed everything in the 1980s. Farm-raised catfish tastes milder, cleaner, and nothing like the wild mudcat that made these sandwiches what they were. People who remember pulling a channel cat off a trot line at dawn and eating it fried on bread by noon know there is no substitute. Number 13, the cracklin and cornbread sandwich. Cracklins are the crispy bits left over after you render hog fat into lard. Small, crunchy, and full of flavor, and in the mountains, people stirred them straight into cornbread batter before baking. The cracklins gave the cornbread a richness and a crunch that plain cornbread never had. You cut a square of cracklin cornbread, split it open, and ate it like a sandwich, sometimes with a smear of butter, sometimes with nothing at all. Hog killing day in late November produced pounds of cracklins, and the ones that did not go into the cornbread went into a jar on the counter for snacking. Nothing from that hog was wasted. The cracklin' cornbread sandwich was the last stop on a chain that started with a living animal and ended with not a single scrap thrown away. Number 12. The cold biscuit and country ham. Country ham was salt-cured and smoked, and a whole ham hung in the smokehouse for months before anyone touched it. You sliced it thin, and if you were eating it hot, you fried it in a skillet and made red-eye gravy from the drippings. But the cold version was its own thing entirely. You took a leftover biscuit from breakfast, split it open, and laid a thin slice of uncooked country ham right on the bread. The salt in the ham was intense, almost sharp, and the cold biscuit was dense and firm from sitting on the counter since morning. Field workers in Virginia and Kentucky carried these in their coat pockets wrapped in a piece of cloth. The salt preserved the ham without refrigeration, and the biscuit held together no matter how rough the day got. It was portable, durable, and filling, and it tasted like smoke and salt and the place you came from. Number 11. The fried rabbit sandwich. Rabbit was the most common wild meat in the hills. You hunted them with a single-shot .22 or caught them in a box trap built from scrap lumber. The meat was lean and mild, somewhere between chicken and pork, but finer grained than either one. You soaked the pieces in salted water overnight, dredged them in seasoned flour, and fried them in lard until the crust turned deep brown. A fried rabbit leg or a piece of backstrap on white bread with salt and pepper was a Saturday supper in the Appalachian foothills from the 1920s through the 1960s. Boys learned to hunt rabbit before they learned to drive. The fried rabbit sandwich disappeared when the woods got smaller and the supermarkets got bigger, and a whole generation grew up never knowing what wild game tasted like between two slices of bread. There is a particular kind of knowledge that lives in the hands. Not in books, not in classrooms, but in the fingers that know how hot the grease should be before the bread goes in, how thin to slice the ham so it curls at the edges, how much pressure to put on a biscuit so it splits clean without crumbling. That knowledge was passed at kitchen tables and wood stoves and open fires for generations, and it was never written down because nobody thought it needed to be. It was just how things were done. When the last person who knew vanished, the sandwich vanished with them. Not because the ingredients disappeared, but because the hands that made it right were gone. That is what we actually lost here, not recipes. Hands. Number 10. The mustard sandwich. 2 slices of white bread and yellow mustard. That is the whole recipe. There is nothing else to add. This was what you ate when there was genuinely nothing left in the house, and it showed up on tables across the rural South more often than anyone wants to admit. The mustard gave you flavor and the bread gave you something to chew, and together they carried you through to the next meal. Dolly Parton has talked openly about growing up on mustard sandwiches in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. It was not a quirky family tradition. It was the bottom of the barrel, and families who lived on it knew exactly what it meant. There is no way to romanticize a mustard sandwich. It was hunger with a condiment on it, and pretending otherwise dishonors the people who survived on it. Number 9. Potted meat on saltines. The little cans of potted meat sat on the bottom shelf of every country store and filling station in the South. They cost almost nothing and lasted years without refrigeration. You peeled the top off, spread the potted meat on saltine crackers with a butter knife, and ate them standing at the counter or sitting on a truck tailgate. The taste was salty and faintly metallic, and the texture was smooth like a rough country pate. Nobody pretended it was fine dining. It was cheap food, and cheap was the whole point. Hunters packed potted meat in their coat pockets on cold mornings. Construction workers kept cans in their toolboxes. Kids ate it after school when both parents were still at work, and the only instruction was a note on the counter that said, "Fix yourself something." It did the job every time. Number 8. The chow chow and hoop cheese sandwich. Chow chow is a pickled relish made from the end of the garden, whatever was left before the frost took it. Green tomatoes, cabbage, onions, peppers, all chopped and put down in vinegar with sugar and mustard seed. Hoop cheese is a mild, firm orange cheese that came in big wheels and sat under a glass dome at the counter of the general store. The storekeeper cut you a wedge with a wire, and you carried it home wrapped in brown paper. A thick slice of hoop cheese with a spoonful of chow chow on light bread was a summer lunch across the Appalachian South. The sweet tang of the relish cut clean through the mild fat of the cheese, and the combination was better than it had any right to be. Both products were common as dirt 50 years ago. Today you have to drive to find either one. Number 7. The chocolate gravy biscuit. This one surprises people who did not grow up with it, but chocolate gravy on a hot biscuit was a real and regular breakfast across the Ozarks and the Upper South. You made it on the stove with cocoa powder, sugar, flour, milk, and a little butter, stirring it the way you would any other gravy until it thickened into a glossy pour. Then you ladled it over split biscuits and ate it with a fork. It tasted like a warm, slightly bitter chocolate sauce, not as sweet as pudding, but richer. Families in Arkansas, Missouri, and the hills of northern Alabama ate this every Sunday morning without thinking twice. Kids grew up believing everybody did it. It was only when they left the mountains and mentioned chocolate gravy to a city friend that they realized the rest of the country had never heard of it. Number 6. The peanut butter and onion sandwich. Thick peanut butter spread on white bread with slices of raw yellow onion laid across the top. You pressed the other slice down hard so the onion pushed into the peanut butter and held fast. The first bite is all peanut butter, the second hits onion, and by the third your mouth does not know what to make of it. The peanut butter coats the sharpness of the onion, and the onion cuts through the heaviness of the peanut butter, and somehow the whole thing works. This was a common working lunch in the hill country of Georgia, the Carolinas, and eastern Tennessee, and the people who ate it were not being eccentric. Peanut butter lasted without refrigeration. Onions kept for weeks in a root cellar, and together they made a sandwich with protein, fat, and enough bite to keep you interested through a long afternoon. It cost pennies. It filled you up. Nobody wrote it down because nobody thought it would disappear. The grandchildren sit at the same kitchen tables and they have no idea. They do not know that the woman making their lunch once ate nothing but bread and mustard for 3 days straight. They do not know that the biscuit recipe she makes from memory was her only inheritance. They do not know that the way she presses her thumb into the dough before folding it is the same motion her own mother used in 1941. These things are not taught in any school. They are absorbed at the kitchen counter or they are lost forever. Every sandwich on this list is a piece of that quiet archive. Not the kind that lives in a museum behind glass, but the kind that lives in a kitchen for exactly as long as somebody still remembers to make it. Number 5. The fried cornmeal mush sandwich. Cornmeal mush was cornmeal and water cooked on the stove until it thickened into a heavy porridge. You ate it hot for supper with butter and milk poured over the top. What you did not finish, you poured into a loaf pan and set it in the icebox overnight until it turned firm as a brick. Next morning, you sliced it thick, fried the slices in bacon grease until both sides went brown and crispy, and laid them on bread. The outside was crunchy and the inside stayed soft and warm, and with a little sorghum drizzled on top, it was a breakfast that stuck with you until noon. This was a 2-for-1 meal. The same pot of cornmeal fed you twice, once as porridge and once as a sandwich, and that kind of double duty was not clever. It was necessary. Number 4. Squirrel and biscuit. Gray squirrels were everywhere in the hardwood forests of the Appalachian Hills, and hunting them was one of the first outdoor skills a boy learned. The meat was dark, lean, and tighter grained than chicken, with a faintly nutty flavor from all the acorns and hickory nuts the animal had eaten. You stewed the squirrel until the meat fell clean off the bone, pulled it apart with 2 forks, and piled it on a split biscuit with a spoonful of the stew broth ladled over the top. The biscuit soaked up the broth, and the meat was tender enough to eat without good teeth. Families in the hollows of eastern Kentucky and southwest Virginia ate squirrel regularly through the 1950s. It was not exotic or adventurous. It was the most available protein walking through the trees, and the biscuit made it something you could carry to the field. Number 3. Lard bread. A piece of white bread spread with a thick layer of lard and a pinch of salt on top. That is the entire sandwich. In the hardest years, some families added a sprinkle of sugar to make it easier for the children. The lard was smooth and white and tasted like clean rendered pork fat, which is exactly what it was. Children ate lard bread after school in the coal camps of West Virginia and the mill towns of eastern Tennessee because there was nothing else between meals. The lard kept you warm when the house was cold, and the bread filled the hole in your stomach, and together they cost less than a penny to make. There is no gentle way to describe what lard bread means. It means the family was broke, and this was how they got through another day without saying it out loud. Number 2, the fried egg and bacon dripping sandwich. You heated the bacon grease that lived in the coffee can on the back of the stove, cracked an egg into it, and fried it until the white edges went brown and lacy. The yolk stayed runny. You laid that egg on a piece of white bread, pressed the other slice down so the yolk broke and soaked golden into the bread, and ate it standing over the sink. The bacon grease gave the egg a smoky depth that butter never could, and the broken yolk turned the bread into something almost like a sauce. This was a fast meal built for people who worked with their hands and did not have time to sit down. A farmer ate this before dawn. A sawmill worker ate this at the end of his shift. It took 2 minutes to make and used nothing that was not already sitting in the kitchen waiting for someone to reach for it. Number 1, grease bread. A piece of bread laid face down in a hot skillet greased with whatever fat was left from the last meal that came before it. Bacon drippings, lard, ham grease, whatever still clung to the iron. The bread fried until the bottom side turned brown and crispy, and then you flipped it once and pulled it out. You folded it in half and ate it standing at the stove. There was no filling. There was no topping. There was just bread and the ghost of the meal that had already been eaten by somebody else. Grease bread is the sandwich nobody talks about because admitting you ate it means admitting how close to the edge your family really was. But millions of people across the American South ate grease bread as children, and they remember the taste the way you remember your own name. It tasted like the skillet. It tasted like the kitchen. It tasted like everything your family had, which was almost nothing at all, and you ate it and you were grateful and you have never once forgotten. Spam and pineapple might sound like a dare, but in the 1970s, it was practically dinner. This sandwich was all about stretching the rules and the budget. A thick slice of Spam got pan-fried until it was brown and crispy around the edges, then placed on a hamburger bun like it belonged there. Then came the twist. A pineapple ring, right on top. Not fresh pineapple, mind you. We are talking about the canned kind, sweet and syrupy, straight from the tin. The two came together like an accidental masterpiece. Salty, smoky Spam playing off the sugary tang of the pineapple in a way that confused your brain but delighted your taste buds. Some people added a bit of mustard, others just left it at that. Either way, it was weirdly good. Spam was everywhere during the war and stuck around long after, and by the 70s, folks had gotten creative with it. This sandwich was born out of necessity and stayed for nostalgia. It was quick, affordable, and always sparked conversation. Even if you did not like it, you remembered it. But if you were not into tropical flair, maybe you preferred your cheese melted and broiled to golden glory, open-faced and unapologetically old school. The mashed potato sandwich is one of those unassuming comfort foods that became a staple for many families during hard times. When there wasn't much in the pantry, leftover mashed potatoes provided a quick and filling solution. The sandwich itself was simple, just a hearty serving of mashed potatoes spread between 2 slices of bread. While it might sound basic, the potatoes brought both substance and satisfaction, especially when other food options were limited. The mashed potatoes could be enhanced with black pepper or a drizzle of gravy if you were lucky enough to have it, adding a little extra flavor to what was essentially a very simple dish. The real beauty of the mashed potato sandwich was its versatility. If you had no other ingredients, it could still make a fulfilling meal. It was also a great way to use up leftovers from a previous meal, turning a side dish into the main course. This sandwich wasn't about gourmet flavors or complex ingredients. It was about being resourceful and making the most out of what you had. For many, it was an affordable, easy way to stretch meals further, especially when money was tight. The mashed potato sandwich might not have been the most glamorous option, but it was a meal that served its purpose well. And while it might seem simple, The next sandwich on our list takes leftovers and transforms them into a surprisingly hearty option. As grim as the name might sound, peanut butter combined with mayo was quite a hit back in the day. In America, kids would often have this at 7 a.m. before school as breakfast they could easily put together. The sandwich was especially popular in the 30s to 60s as it was cheap and filling. Much like other sandwiches in the list, the peanut butter and mayo combination was also a product of the Great Depression. The mayo provided generous proteins that would pair well with fats from the peanut butter. In a time of financial instability, people found this sandwich to be a great way to ensure intake of important nutrients. As financial situations improved in America, this sandwich was replaced by newer and rather better-tasting options. The apple and mayo sandwich might seem like a strange combination, but it was a surprisingly popular choice during tough times when ingredients were scarce and creativity in the kitchen was key. Sliced apples, typically tart varieties, were paired with creamy mayonnaise between slices of bread. The sweetness of the apples contrasted with the rich, tangy mayo, creating a unique and unexpected flavor profile. It wasn't the type of sandwich you would find in any deli, but it became a go-to option for those looking for something quick and different. The apples, which were relatively inexpensive and often readily available, provided a bit of freshness and texture, while the mayo added a comforting creaminess that tied the whole thing together. The apple and mayo sandwich was especially popular during times of rationing or when fresh produce was hard to come by, offering a rare chance to enjoy a sweet, crunchy bite. While it wasn't a culinary masterpiece, it was a meal that worked with what was available, perfect for those on tight budgets. The sandwich wasn't fancy, but it had an undeniable charm. For many, it was an odd but delicious treat that felt like a luxury in a world where simple ingredients were used to make the most of every meal. And if you thought the apple and mayo sandwich was unexpected, just wait until the next sandwich, where another quirky combination takes center stage with a surprising flavor twist. There is something dangerously comforting about mixing bacon grease with anything sweet, and that is exactly what bacon and apple butter on white bread was. You take crisp, salty bacon, still warm from the skillet, and press it into a slice of soft white bread that has been generously smeared with apple butter. That is it. No lettuce, no cheese, no rules. The combination was 100% homemade magic. It tasted like fall mornings, cast iron skillets, and someone's grandma telling you not to eat too fast. Apple butter gave it this rich, spiced flavor that clung to your mouth just long enough for the bacon to come crashing through. It was smoky. It was sweet. It was not trying to impress anyone. The real win here was in how it reused leftovers. If breakfast was done, and you had a few stray strips of bacon and a jar of apple butter on hand, this sandwich practically made itself. The kind of thing you whipped up while the coffee was still brewing. Maybe it never made it to a diner menu, but it made it to enough hearts to matter. And speaking of sandwiches that mattered, let us talk about the skyscraper of cold cuts that ruled every diner plate with a toothpick flag on top. Remember what chilly days at Graham's called for back in the day? If you guessed hot turkey sandwich, you're absolutely right. This sandwich was another one of Grandma's delicious ways of using up leftover turkey from Thanksgiving. This sandwich featured slices of tender turkey served hot, often open-faced, with a generous ladle of rich, savory gravy poured over the top. Sounds delicious, right? Grandma made her hot turkey sandwich special with the gravy. Whether she made it from scratch with turkey drippings or used a trusted recipe, the rich gravy soaked into the bread, making each bite juicy and flavorful. She knew that nothing went to waste, and the hot turkey sandwich was a delicious way to make the most of those leftovers. Sometimes a quick and simple solution was needed when the month's budget was running low. Enter the cold hot dog slices and ketchup sandwich. This sandwich was made with leftover hot dogs, sliced cold, and slathered with ketchup between slices of bread. It wasn't fancy, but it was cheap, easy to make, and comforting. After payday, people might have splurged on hot dogs, but by the end of the week, those leftovers would be repurposed into this quick fix. The cold hot dog slices were nothing more than a vehicle for the ketchup, but when combined with bread, it made a satisfying snack or lunch. There wasn't much finesse to it, but it worked. It might not win any culinary awards, but when you've got limited resources, you make do with what you have. And while this sandwich may seem like an odd pairing, it's definitely one you'd want to try if you're in need of a last-minute meal. However, if you're craving something a little heartier, the next sandwich might just be what you're looking for. Now we are talking classic. Corned beef and coleslaw on seeded rye is one of those sandwiches that knew how to make an entrance without raising its voice. You would find it wrapped in wax paper at your local deli or sitting proud on a tray next to a pickle spear and a bag of chips. The corned beef was thin-sliced but packed with punch, salty, tender, and just fatty enough to remind you this was not diet food. Then came the slaw. Not too creamy, not too dry, with just the right crunch to cut through the richness of the meat. Pile that high between two slices of seeded rye, sturdy, peppery, with that classic bite, and you had something special. This was the kind of sandwich that told you to sit down and take your time. It did not rush. It did not play games. It was the kind of thing you ordered when you wanted to feel like an adult, even if you were still wearing platform shoes and listening to disco on cassette. Deli counters made legends, and this one was a heavy hitter. But if corned beef was too bold for your taste, there was always its milder cousin, the quiet, sweet-talking ham salad that somehow became a staple without anyone noticing. The head cheese sandwich in basic terms is just slices of head cheese, which is a cold cut made from meat from the head of a calf or pig on bread. If you'd rather not the head, then you can also use trimmings, and in terms of assembly, this resembles more of a charcuterie board than anything else. It's packed to the brim with vegetables, spices, and other aromatics. Though still, the entire head of an animal can be a bit of a daunting task for any chef. Once you've got your bread toasted and your spread spreaded, add your spices and vegetables and the hog's head cheese and assemble accordingly. If you actually manage to pull it off, this is definitely a vintage worth getting your hands dirtier than usual. Sometimes simplicity is key, and the relish and cheese sandwich is the epitome of that principle. A slice of American cheese paired with a dollop of sweet pickle relish was all it took to create this unexpected but surprisingly delicious sandwich. The relish added a little sweetness and tang, while the cheese gave it a creamy, melty texture. It wasn't about fancy ingredients, just bread, cheese, and relish. The sweet and salty combination made it a great quick snack when funds were tight and you needed something to fill you up without breaking the bank. The relish provided a burst of flavor, cutting through the richness of the cheese, and the sandwich itself was easy to put together with ingredients that were often on hand. Even though it may seem like an odd combination, the simplicity of the relish and cheese sandwich made it a popular choice for those who needed something quick and satisfying. Whether you had it as a snack or a meal, it always offered a good balance of flavors. This sandwich wasn't going to win any gourmet awards, but it did the job when you needed a cheap and satisfying meal. Sometimes, it's the simplest combinations that leave the greatest impression. But if you think a slice of cheese and a bit of relish is all you need for a great sandwich, the next one might just take your taste buds by surprise. Let's be honest. Pimento cheese spread does not sound like the kind of thing that would stick with you. But in the 1970s, it did. This was the sandwich you pulled from a metal lunchbox with a thermos to match. Kraft pimento cheese came in a little glass jar, neon orange and suspiciously shiny. Spread it onto white or wheat bread, top it with a layer of sweet pickles, and what you got was a flavor combo that somehow tasted like home. The creaminess of the cheese, the vinegary bite of the pickles, and that soft bread just soaking it all in, it hit differently. No toasting, no grilling, just a cold sandwich, plain and proud. It was a sandwich that looked like it was made in 5 minutes because it probably was. But that was the whole point. It was easy, cheap, and oddly comforting. You saw it at picnics, in school bags, and on paper plates at neighborhood block parties. And while it might not be the most elegant thing on this list, it never pretended to be anything it wasn't. But if you were feeling brave or just really nostalgic, the next sandwich took a sharp left into strong flavors, bold textures, and a rye bread that meant business. Liverwurst might not be everyone's cup of tea, but for those who loved it, there was nothing quite like a liverwurst sandwich. So, liverwurst, or liver sausage, has German roots and is a staple in many European countries. The name liverwurst comes from the German words Lieber, which means liver, and Wurst, which means sausage. This one was also made with rye bread and was a common street food in the streets of New York. Grandma gave it a home-like feel by using homemade bread and using fresh veggies and toppings like mustard, pickles, or onions. Grandma knew that liverwurst sandwiches were a bit of a specialty, something that not everyone would appreciate. But for those who did, it was a real treat. The mayonnaise and lettuce sandwich may seem like an odd combination at first, but it was a simple, satisfying meal for many families during tough times. Before the era of trendy BLTs and elaborate sandwiches, this humble sandwich was a go-to for those looking for something fresh and easy to prepare. Made with crisp iceberg lettuce and creamy mayonnaise, it provided a refreshing crunch and rich flavor, often when other ingredients were too expensive or scarce. Iceberg lettuce was inexpensive and readily available, making it the perfect base for this sandwich. The mayonnaise added a creamy texture, making each bite smooth and comforting. While this sandwich may not have been fancy, it was beloved for its simplicity and the way it brightened up an otherwise basic meal. In times when fresh produce was limited, the lettuce offered a rare dose of green, and the mayo brought a touch of indulgence. It wasn't a sandwich for a gourmet feast, but it was a practical and affordable meal when resources were stretched thin. For many families, the mayonnaise and lettuce sandwich was the only fresh food they could afford. It wasn't about gourmet ingredients or complex flavors. It was about making do with what was available, and it worked. This sandwich served as a reminder of how, sometimes, the simplest meals are the ones that bring comfort. But if you think this sandwich was basic, wait until you see what's next, where the simplicity of the meal gets a little more daring. Ham salad was the sandwich that crept into your life without warning and just stayed. It was never flashy, never demanding, but it had a way of showing up when you needed it most. Diced ham, usually the leftovers from Sunday dinner, got chopped fine and tossed with mayonnaise, sweet pickle relish, and maybe a squirt of yellow mustard or a spoonful of Miracle Whip if you were feeling wild. It was smooth, creamy, with just enough tang to make you wonder why you did not eat it more often. Spread it thick on soft white bread. Throw on a lettuce leaf if you're trying to be classy, and you had a sandwich that felt like summer picnics and small-town potlucks. It tasted like home. Like old Tupperware containers pulled from the fridge and packed into a picnic basket with a bag of chips and a slice of pie wrapped in foil. No one ever called it their favorite, but no one turned it down either. That is the magic of ham salad. It stayed in the background, steady and familiar. But not every sandwich played it safe. Some brought the heat, and maybe a little spice from south of the border. When times were tough and budgets were tight, the potted meat and pickle sandwich became a popular choice for many families. Potted meat, often deviled ham or canned potted meat, was an affordable and long-lasting option that could be stored on the shelf for months. It was a quick fix for lunch or dinner, providing the protein needed to get through the day without breaking the bank. The key to this sandwich was the addition of pickles, which added a sharp, tangy crunch that perfectly complemented the rich, salty meat. The pickles cut through the richness of the potted meat, bringing balance and an extra layer of flavor to the sandwich. Combined with the soft bread, it created a hearty, satisfying meal. While the sandwich might not have been gourmet, it was practical, affordable, and filling. Potted meat, though not glamorous, was a staple in many households during difficult times because of its long shelf life and low cost. The pickles, often a pantry staple, brought a much-needed contrast to the meat, giving the sandwich a bit of freshness and bite. This sandwich was a great example of how people made do with what they had, using simple ingredients to create a meal that could feed a family without breaking the bank. And while the potted meat and pickle combo served its purpose well, things are about to get a little more savory and filling with the next sandwich. Cooked chicken livers mixed with onions and spices came together to create the chicken liver sandwich. Now, out of all the ones on the list, this one has probably stood the test of time the most rigidly. You'll still find it in the odd bistro or cafe here and there. Preparing it is a bit of work, but for those who want to expand their sandwich arsenal, this is a worthy addition. You'll need celery, red onions, curry powder, salt and pepper, and lettuce of your choice. Once you've mixed your meat with your vegetables and spices, it's time to get cooking in a 350-degree skillet and mix well. Once it's all ready, assemble your sandwich and see just why this was so popular around the 1940-1960s. When it comes to using leftovers in the most creative way, the spaghetti sandwich is a prime example of resourcefulness. After a hearty meal of spaghetti, rather than letting any leftover noodles go to waste, many families would stuff the cold or reheated pasta between slices of bread, creating a sandwich that was both filling and practical. The beauty of the spaghetti sandwich lay in its simplicity. There was no need for additional ingredients, just pasta and sauce on bread, and that was enough to provide sustenance. Whether it was enjoyed cold or warmed up in a skillet, this sandwich made use of what was already prepared, turning leftovers into a whole new meal. It was a quick fix for lunch or dinner when funds were tight, and cooking from scratch wasn't an option. For many, the spaghetti sandwich wasn't just a meal, it was a way to stretch food further, especially during times of scarcity. The bread helped soak up the sauce, while the pasta provided a comforting, hearty filling. It wasn't a sandwich you'd see at a fancy restaurant, but it served its purpose well, turning a simple leftover dish into a satisfying, portable meal. It's the kind of meal that may sound odd to some, but to those who lived through hard times, it was a tasty and practical solution. When you needed to fill up and didn't have time or money for anything else, the spaghetti sandwich got the job done. And if you think spaghetti on bread is a simple fix, wait until you see what's next. Now this one came out of left field, unless you grew up near a Chinatown diner. The egg foo young sandwich was one of those things that made 0 sense on paper, but the second you took a bite, you stopped asking questions. Start with an egg patty, crispy on the outside, soft on the inside, and packed with bean sprouts, green onions, maybe a little chopped pork or shrimp if you got the good kind. Then came the gravy. Not just poured, but drenched. Thick brown gravy ladled right over the patty until it practically dripped off the sides. Slide the whole thing into a hamburger bun, close it up, and prepare yourself for the kind of meal that laughs in the face of napkins. It was heavy, hot, and heartwarming. The egg foo young sandwich felt like the kind of invention you only make when you are really hungry and just messing around in the kitchen. But in the 1970s, this was a lunchtime legend for anyone who knew where to find it. Of course, if you were not lucky enough to live near a place that served one of these, you probably grew up with something even saltier, way more military, and still showing up on diner menus today. The scrapple sandwich is exactly what the name suggests: fried slices of scrapple on bread. Traditionally, this sandwich would be sliced and prepared in a skillet, under a thick layer of eggs. It definitely became popular around the Maryland to New York district, but the recipe itself is properly ancient. An 1853 extract from a cookbook advises using pork that wouldn't be suitable for sausage. It was also popular for its health benefits. It can be made in a variety of ways, and some people include crispy cabbage on top and make it into a waffle with mayo. Mix and match and see what works best for you. Maybe you'll find something worth sharing. But for now, the scrapple sandwich can only be something you create. With its popularity last seen in the mid-1850s, this sandwich is something that we can only find in old extracts now. If you've ever had an egg salad sandwich, you might think you know what's coming with the chopped egg and vinegar sandwich. But this isn't your average egg salad. Instead of the usual mayonnaise, this sandwich relied on vinegar or mustard to give the eggs that tangy kick. Hard-boiled eggs were chopped up, mixed with the vinegar or mustard, and spread between 2 slices of bread. It wasn't the most luxurious meal, but it was cheap, filling, and had a sharp, tangy flavor that worked wonders. It was a makeshift egg salad, but it did the job when you needed something simple and satisfying. The vinegar or mustard added just enough zing to make the sandwich stand out. And while this might have been a favorite for some, the next sandwich is all about taking those beans you've got left over and turning them into something great. Sardine and mustard sandwiches are as basic as they sound and much better than you might initially give them credit for. Be realistic and think about a post-Depression era America where a lot of neighborhoods and homes were still reeling from the effects. Dollars could buy a bit more and went back to their usual strength, but everything was a bit touch and go for a while, and dishes like sardine and mustard sandwiches were the cure. Even more attractive than the taste was the price of this beauty, because for about $1.50 you had yourself a solid meal. Many labor workers, like your friendly neighborhood forklift or dock workers, might remember eating these during their lunch breaks. People would usually spice it up with other vegetables, toppings, and peppers to make a proper feast out of a cheap thrill. And we would like to join the fun too. You might be familiar with peanut butter and banana, but how about a banana and mayo sandwich? It's a southern oddity that, over time, turned into a tradition. The combination of ripe banana slices and mayonnaise might sound strange, but there's something about the sweet, slippery texture of the banana paired with the creamy tang of mayo that works. It was a cheap, easy-to-make sandwich that satisfied a sweet tooth while also providing some sustenance. It's not the kind of sandwich you'll find at a deli, but it was a comfort food for many who grew up with it. Over time, it became a quirky favorite, one of those sandwiches that you either love or have no interest in trying at all. But whether you loved it or not, it's hard to forget such a memorable and unexpected combination. And while the banana and mayo sandwich might be a Southern classic, things are about to get even tangier with the next sandwich. Imagine being 8 years old and opening your lunchbox to find chopped olive and cream cheese on pumpernickel. Either your mom was ahead of her time, or she found an old cocktail recipe card and just went with it. This sandwich was salty, tangy, creamy, and somehow kind of grown up. You had green olives chopped so fine they could sneak into your taste buds before your brain caught on, mixed with cream cheese until it was a spread so thick it stuck to the knife like it had a mission. All of that smeared onto a slice of deep, dark pumpernickel that practically demanded you respect it. It was not flashy, it was not sweet, and no kid was trading their cookie for it, but it had an edge, the kind of flavor that got better the more you chewed. Somewhere along the way, this party appetizer snuck into lunchboxes, Tupperware, and even a few kitchen counters at 2 in the morning. It was strange, but it made sense. The 70s were weird like that. Spreads were suddenly sandwiches and finger food was fair game. Of course, if you thought cold spreads were wild, wait until you see what happens when tuna salad goes face to face with a broiler. Sometimes, simplicity is the best solution, and the boiled potato and butter sandwich is a perfect example. It's as basic as it gets. Boiled potatoes smashed onto bread with a generous spread of butter and a sprinkle of salt. It sounds simple, maybe even boring, but there's something about the soft, creamy texture of the potatoes combined with the richness of butter that makes this sandwich surprisingly satisfying. The potatoes were filling, cheap, and readily available, while the butter added a touch of luxury. It was the kind of meal that was comforting in its simplicity, especially when times were tough and money was tight. This sandwich was often enjoyed warm, making it all the more comforting on a cold day. And while it might not have been fancy, it tasted better than it sounds. But if you're in the mood for something a little more indulgent and messy, the next sandwich might be just what you're looking for. Corned beef tongue with mustard in between fluffy bread slices. Okay, beef tongue might be way out of your palate, but don't disregard the corned beef tongue sandwich just yet. For something to fade from history, it's got to cement its spot there first, right? Can't do that if you don't bring something to the table. Perhaps this one will bring a lot more than you'd expect. It's traditionally prepared with carrots, garlic, red pepper, black pepper, salt, onions, mayo, and spice like bell pepper, paprika, and some garnishes like lime and parsley. So we already have the makings of a savory delight. You really want to keep a close eye on the beef tongue while it's in the pot, though. It can alter the flavor or dry it out fast. Though this sandwich has faded into the past now, the intricacy and delicacy through which it was created is a marvel to look back at. Maybe one day, this sandwich will come back at fancy restaurants, but for now, it remains a figment of the past. Way before anyone was throwing around the word fusion, people were already stuffing taco night into a sandwich roll and calling it lunch. The taco-inspired ground beef sandwich was a bold, brilliant mess of spicy ground beef seasoned with chili powder, cumin, and whatever was on hand. This was the 70s after all. If it came in a seasoning packet, it was probably fair game. The meat got piled high into a soft hoagie roll, topped with shredded cheddar, crisp lettuce, and sometimes a few sad tomatoes trying to keep up. Every bite was an explosion of salty heat and melty cheese. It was not clean, it was not elegant, but it was delicious. This was comfort food that was borrowed from the taco truck before taco trucks were even a thing. You could find it at school cafeterias, mom-and-pop diners, and even in the occasional backyard cookout where somebody decided to get creative. The bread soaked up all that seasoned grease, and somehow it just worked. You were not going to win any awards for presentation, but your taste buds would be too busy partying to care. And speaking of comfort food with attitude, the next sandwich on our list came straight from the king himself, and probably your aunt's frying pan. Sometimes the oddest combinations end up being the most memorable, and the pickle and peanut butter sandwich is one of those strange pairings that gained a cult following. The combination of creamy peanut butter and crunchy pickles might seem bizarre at first, but it worked. Whether you preferred dill pickles or sweet ones, they added a crunch and tang that complemented the rich, nutty flavor of the peanut butter. It was a sandwich that took a little getting used to, but once you did, it became oddly addictive. The saltiness of the peanut butter paired perfectly with the sharpness of the pickles, making it a surprising yet satisfying snack or meal. It's the kind of sandwich that's hard to forget once you've tried it, and while it may not have been for everyone, it certainly had its fans. But if you think this combo is wild, things are about to get even more unusual with the next sandwich that's all about adding a little tangy bite. The club sandwich was never shy about making an entrance. This was the sandwich equivalent of wearing a tuxedo to a barbecue. Triple layered, cut diagonally, and always served with a cocktail toothpick jabbed right through the middle like a victory flag, the classic clubhouse was a masterclass in controlled chaos. You had turkey, ham, and bacon stacked with lettuce, tomato, and mayonnaise on white toast, then doubled up like it had something to prove. One bite, and you got the salty crunch of bacon, the cool snap of lettuce, the savory chew of ham, and that creamy mayo keeping everything glued together. It was tall. It was filling. It was an edible tower of American lunch pride. You could find it at diners, roadside motels, airport cafes, and your Aunt Linda's house on a Sunday afternoon. No one ever finished a club sandwich without looking like they'd just solved a puzzle. Picking it up was half the battle. Eating it cleanly? Impossible. But satisfying? Always. This was the sandwich you ordered when you wanted to feel like you were doing something important. And while this one wore its sandwich royalty crown proudly, the next one took a completely different route, turning cheap lunch meat into the closest thing we ever got to pizza on a bun. If you've ever opened a can of sardines, you know it has a distinct, strong flavor, one that isn't for everyone. But during the Great Depression, a canned sardine and mayo sandwich was a common lunch that stretched a tight budget. Sardines were affordable, packed with protein, and could sit on the shelf for ages. They weren't just easy to find, they were easy to store. The fish was mashed up with mayonnaise, often with a little bit of onion for extra bite, then slathered between slices of bread. Though the flavor might have been an acquired taste, it was a filling meal that kept hunger at bay. And with the mayo adding creaminess, it was surprisingly comforting. While sardines may not be the most glamorous fish, they certainly played an important role in feeding families during tough times. You might think this sandwich is a strange mix, but it's actually a great way to get protein when the pantry's running low. And while sardines gave you that fishy flavor, it was about to get a little more sweet and creamy with the next sandwich on our list. Olives might not make a comeback anytime soon in today's world, but they will return on the list with egg and olive sandwiches. Like we said, olives were starting to get really hot as the ideal sandwich topping. Adaptable, flexible, and cheap is all you want out of an accessory to your sandwich. Like those fancy earrings that go perfect with your dress, olives and eggs went together like a Cupid-certified match made in heaven. People went wild around the mid-1970s for hard-boiled eggs and salted olives in their sandwich, green or black. Black olives got a bit more traction with eggs though, whereas greens synergized better with peanut butter. Would you ever try a sandwich that consists only of an egg and a fruit? By the way, you did know olives are fruits, right? In the summer, when tomatoes were in season and fresh produce was at its peak, tomato and sugar sandwiches became a beloved choice. Thick slices of juicy, ripe tomatoes sprinkled with sugar, were placed between slices of bread. It might sound odd, but the sweetness of the sugar balanced the tang of the tomatoes, making it an unexpectedly delicious combo. Some people even added a little mayonnaise to the mix for extra creaminess. This sandwich became a perfect treat, often eaten barefoot on the porch in the warmth of summer. It was simple and sweet, a perfect way to enjoy the bounty of the season without spending much. While it was certainly a summertime favorite, this combo is one of those meals that people today may never quite understand. But if you think this sweet and savory duo is odd, the next sandwich is even more unconventional. Pick one. Pick any sandwich from this list and make it this week. The banana and mayonnaise sandwich takes 30 seconds. The fried green tomato sandwich takes 5 minutes. The apple butter biscuit takes nothing but a jar and a hot oven. Make it, sit down at the table, and eat it the way it was meant to be eaten. Slowly. These sandwiches kept people alive when nobody was paying attention, and they deserve to be remembered by the people who came after. Leave a comment and tell me which one your family used to make. I am James, and I will see you in the next one.